thank you very much for showing up today to talk about tutoring people for whom English is a second or third or fourth language. Before we get started, I want to thank the Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island, which sponsors these programs. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and they are now accepting residents. Also of interest, they're offering day stay and respite programs. If that sounds of interest to you, call 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments on Rolling Bay today, 360-689-4314. And we're also grateful for the hospitality of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, our neighbors who are residents of this area long before white settlers showed up. And we are grateful for their continued outreach to us as we try to heal centuries-long distances between our people. So with that, Leigh Jones-Bamman and Mary Jensen are here to talk about a group that is BESL, or Bainbridge English as a Second Language, a tutoring group. And I would like it if you could start us off just by giving us a little overview of your organization and what you do. And thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And before I start answering your question, could you give me permission to share the screen?
Yes, I could do that. Just a second.
Great.
More. There you go. You are now in screen sharing power.
All right. And oops, we don't want that. So, thank you for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity to be here. So I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about our organization. And so Mary and I are both volunteers with BESL. And we are a loosely knit group of people who volunteer to help people who want to improve their English skills in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And there are about 12 of us right now. And our job is to help those students of ours define and reach their goals. We work with adults, and so they have a reason why they want to be tutored, and so it's up to us to help them figure it out if they don't already know, and then help them reach those goals. And traditionally we work with adults, except on very rare case-by-case basis we have worked with children and teens, and ironically Mary and I both work with teens at the moment, but that is really not our focus, and we are not looking to do that. Something came up and we sort of fell into this, and we're loving it and enjoying it, but that's not what the group is about. So we typically work one-on-one. Some of our tutors have worked in small groups. I know one of them has worked with two women from Guatemala who are friends, and so that was a nice small group. And I think one of our tutors has worked with a husband and wife, but typically it's more one-on-one. And so the tutor and the learner decide for themselves how often they want to meet. Usually it's once a week for a couple of hours, 1 to 2 hours. But again, there's no set rule about how often you have to meet. And so they choose that, and they also choose where they're meeting. Now, before the pandemic, we were all meeting in person in public places. And so some people were at the library or upstairs at TNC. Now, for a couple of years, we've been meeting on Zoom. And then as the weather permitted, people were meeting outside. And now as people are feeling comfortable meeting in person, whether inside or outside, that pair can make that choice. So we've had tutors in the past that didn't live on the island, and so they were, or some that lived on the island were willing to drive over to Kitsap to tutor in some places. And right now we have a tutor who lives in Bremerton, so she's doing some tutoring there. I'll tell you a little bit about how we got started. In 2009, there was an organization called the Kitsap Adult Center for Education, and they were either, I'm not clear on this, either they were a part of the Kitsap Literacy Council, or else they they were the successor to that. And they had a small paid staff and an office space, and they provided training to volunteers. And then they matched them with learners. And so that went on for quite a while. But in 2016, they lost all of their funding. They had some federal and state funding. They lost all that funding, and they just had to close. So there were some tutors on Bainbridge who said, well, let's just keep going. So they did. And here we are today. Some of those original tutors have gone, and more new people have come in. But that's why I say that we're a loose-knit organization, or a loose-knit group of people, because we are not an organization, and there is no formal organization that sponsors us. We have some structures in place. We have some specific protocols for assessing new learners that are coming in, and we have some protocols and procedures for training and supporting our new and current volunteers. We have a library. When CASE closed, we inherited a lot of their books, which was great. So we have manuals for tutors, we have curricula, we have books at various reading levels. So all the tutors have access to that, which is very helpful. And obviously there are a lot of online resources, and we kind of share those things together. And we have monthly meetings where sometimes people present some information or talk about an article or something, and sometimes people just bring up an issue, and we help them deal with whatever that issue is. So that is kind of the basic structure of who we are.
So I know, I'm curious because I'm guessing that people knew about the Kitsap organization. How do you get in touch with people who might be looking for tutors?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to answer I'm going to talk about a little different question first, and then I think Mary can answer that question.
Okay, well, we can talk about how people who want to be tutors could join, and then hope there might be people there to tutor.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Reed. So we don't have any requirements for people's backgrounds when they want to be tutors. Some of us have a background in education. I was an elementary teacher, and Mary is a speech and language pathologist right now. Some of our tutors have been or are professors, social workers, coming from various business backgrounds. I think people decide they want to be a tutor because they love language, they love reading, they love teaching, whether they have formal or informal experiences in that. And some of us have lived in other countries, and actually 2 of our tutors are immigrants, and they were born and raised in other countries. But we're interested in other cultures and learning about them, and also helping people from other countries and cultures come to this country and acclimate and be able to thrive here in the United States. People want volunteer opportunities, and some of us are retired and maybe want to continue doing similar work to what we did as we were working. Some people want to try something different. And there's some tutors who are still working, and they're kind of thinking about the work-life balance, and they're thinking they want to have a little more emphasis on the life. And so they want to tutor because that's something that is different from what they're doing when they're working and expresses a different side of them. But I think all of us want to help other people. And so how we get tutors is like today, we're spreading the word. And often we spread the word through word of mouth. So, a tutor speaks to their friend and says, this is what we're doing. And the friend says, oh, that sounds interesting. Sometimes somebody went to the library and asked about tutoring opportunities that had to do with literacy. And so they referred them to us. In Bremerton, there is the Kitsap Immigration Assistance Center, and they provide a ton of assistance for immigrants, from legal assistance to basic needs, and they also do ESL tutoring. But they have referred some students to us, students who were in the North Kitsap area or on Bainbridge. So we've gotten a few students that way. And we have our flyer, and I'm going to share the screen again. And thank you, Reed, for unsharing for a while. I forgot. This is a flyer that we use to recruit new students, but tutors can also, potential tutors often can see that too. And so this has our email address, BESL tutors@gmail.com, and we put this in various restaurants, on public bulletin boards at places like Helpline House and Housing Resources, so that and in the library. So there are a variety of ways that people find out about us.
We also have approached the schools, because the schools know that there are children that come in who need ESL tutoring, and there's a program in the schools for that. So we assume if the children are learning English, their parents also need to learn English. And so we have been able to connect with counselors at the school to let parents know that this is an opportunity for them at no cost.
And we really would like men to join. We don't have any men as part of our group at this point. I think in the past we had one. But there are some potential students who would feel more comfortable with a man. So we are really would be very happy to have some male tutors.
Can you tell me something about the variety of home countries and languages that of the people that you've been working with, and maybe what they're looking for when they're meeting with this group? Might make it clearer about what kinds of expectations a tutor might have.
All right. Well, we were actually curious. So we did a little poll of our tutors to say, what countries have people come from that you are working with? So I have a list. I will read you the list. Here we go. Syria, Mexico, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Japan, Argentina, Guatemala, China, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and then we have au pairs that come to Kitsap County from a variety of countries. And keeping all these countries, those people are living amongst us here on Bainbridge Island or throughout Kitsap County. And then we were wondering about the languages. So languages include, probably not exclusively this, Russian, Arabic, Kurdish, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Lingala, which is an African language, Mandarin, Japanese, and even a Mayan language. And as Reed pointed out, often the folks that we see, this is not their second language. It is often third, fourth, or maybe even fifth language that they're learning. And their skills range from almost nothing when they arrive here on the border to people that have intermediate skills already, and they just need to improve their skills for their professional goals or just for being in the community. I think Leigh is going to show us this handy dandy little chart of the stages of language acquisition that people tend to go through. And I would like you to think about, if you took your high school Spanish and then you went to Mexico, possibly some remote area where almost no one spoke English, what you might do when you first get there. So the first stage is considered to be pre-production, also called a silent period, because basically you don't know what anybody's saying and you don't know how to say anything to them. So you mostly try to get by silently, which is what most of us would do when confronted with that, except that if we're on vacation, we get to go home in a couple of weeks, and these people don't get to go home. So then the next area would be the early production. And that's when you start to venture forth and you use some vocabulary, some short phrases you might have memorized, and you hope that you understand the answer that people give you. But you're pretty tentative still at that point. From there, you'd get on to what's called speech emergent. And now you're starting to talk a little more often. You have some longer sentences, but it better be on a topic you're pretty familiar with, and really with a gentle, understanding listener, probably. When you get to beginning fluency, in a social situation on a topic you're kind of familiar with, you're getting a little, got a little bit of chutzpah here. I can kind of do this, and you're starting to venture out a little bit more. You're still going to make some grammar errors, and there's still going to be times when it's hard for you to understand or formulate what you want to say. Intermediate fluency is pretty good. Now, in a social situation, you can get by. You can understand what they're saying to you. You can formulate sentences that make sense, maybe still have a few errors. If you're getting into higher order thinking or on a topic you're not very familiar with that you don't have the vocabulary for, then you're probably still going to struggle a bit. Everybody is hoping for advanced fluency, which means you're pretty good across the board. This doesn't mean, though, that you don't have an accent. You probably still do, and there are probably still idiomatic phrases that you will not understand or that you will use incorrectly, because it's still just very difficult to become a native type speaker, especially if you're starting as an adult. Okay, something else. Oh, somewhere along the line, what you do hope is that you start skipping the step where you think about what you want to say in your language, and then you translate it into the next language. At some point, you want to get to the point where you hear what is said to you and you respond, and you skip the whole native language part. You are actually in that language.
And you're saying, Mary, that your tutors, you and others, have helped people at every level of this chart.
Yeah, I think by the time they get to advanced fluency, they've outgrown us. But we definitely have had people with intermediate fluency that have professional needs, or, as we're going to talk about some of their other goals, they just have some areas that they're not comfortable in yet, and they still want some help.
Yeah, I know I have talked to somebody who came here from DRC who has said, I just want to make it so it's clearer when I'm talking to people what I'm saying, because sometimes they don't understand me because of my accent, and I'd like to improve my enunciation or whatever.
Right. And accent modification is another whole can of worms, and it's actually somewhat controversial, and about whether or not you can reduce, whether you should and can reduce your accent and how much you can reduce it. And
it might be a personal choice as much as we as a recipient should not be maybe judgmental about that. But if somebody would like to do that, they're entitled to give it a shot, I'm sure.
Well, strangely, I've been reading about this recently, and we don't want to get too far into this, but there is a group of people who feel like that isn't really a choice, that society has forced the choice on them, and that it's not, even if a person says they want to change their accent, they still shouldn't have to and shouldn't be encouraged to do so, which, there we go. Controversy. Always interesting, right?
Exactly. Okay, I'm not going to come down on a point there, but anyway.
Okay, yeah, we'll leave it right there. So, and as you notice through this chart, clearly, the more you venture out and get brave and try to speak, the more willing you are to take those risks, the better your language starts to get in your new language. And we try to provide that as tutors, a safe spot for people to make all those errors, to get some gentle feedback so that they can be more confident in a different setting. So, and then you were wondering, why do people want to learn English here? What are their motivations in particular? Well, for many people, the main driver is just getting enough English to hold a job and to get through daily life in an English-speaking country. You have to be able to go shopping. I mean, again, I come back to my idea, if you've gone to another country where you've got just a little tiny bit of language, just going to the store can be daunting. And sometimes you don't even know how to make a change, or you don't know if you got change. It's just it's overwhelming. People have to make doctor appointments here. They have to figure out transportation. And then, of course, it's the big one is housing. How do you get through that? You've got to have some English. You've got to have some help, probably. Parents need to understand what's coming home from the schools. So that's always tricky, and attend parent conferences. There have been times in the past where siblings have had to translate for parents, or even the child, him or herself, has translated. The schools always try to accommodate with a translator, but it doesn't always happen, and pretty awkward to have your brother translating the parent conference. So yeah, we try to get away from that.
Yeah, and I know we had a woman from Iran who was helping out here for a while, and when she was getting started, her teenage son would come when she had a problem that she was trying to solve with us, just to make it simpler for her.
Yeah.
And I can see why you would be motivated to get enough English so that you were not dependent on your children to help you get through day-to-day activities.
Well, you're right. And one person actually said directly to us, she wanted to speak enough English that she would be fully recognized as an adult by being able to cope independently. So that was a quote from her. So, and obviously her language got pretty good to come up with that quote. So let's see, I guess I would make sure I know where I am. Oh yeah, and then there are exams that people have to take. There's the naturalization exam if they're trying to become a citizen. Some of the au pairs particularly want to take the test of English as a foreign language exam because they need to pass that to enter an American university. And then there's even just getting a driver's license. You have to speak English to do that, pretty much. Some people are at a kind of an intermediate or emergent level where they just want to be able to make friends and have a social life. So maybe their needs aren't as desperate, but they still, you know, to be part of this community, they want to be able to talk to people. And let's see, yeah, and to be able to maybe join in some, maybe join the senior center, join some other activities that would be fun for them to do, but they're not confident enough to do it until their English improves. Oh, I have one more thing. That's right, one more thing. We had some specific examples of goals that were met after people had their English under control. We had a woman from Japan who was a wife and mother in her 30s, and she got her first job in the United States after having some tutoring. A woman from China who passed her bookkeeping exam. A man from Mexico who was a new father, and he started his own painting business. It's been very successful. There's a Kurdish man from Iraq who'd been in the United States for several years and just finished a program at Olympic College. And he's been working through the interview process with working on his English to become a Kitsap Transit Access bus operator. So people are doing a variety of jobs once they get their English up to the point they need it to be, because people come in with a lot of skills already.
And boy, Kitsap Transit is happy to have another bus driver. I'll tell you
I
that.
know, I know.
As we all are. So can you tell me a little bit about what a typical session might be between a volunteer and one of these people who is looking for a tutor?
Yeah. So it really depends on the learner's goals. But there are sort of typical components to a lesson. And we do focus on all 4 language skills: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Sometimes more emphasis on one or more of those, depending on what the learner wants to do. But typically we start with talk time, and that's just an informal chat with the learner. And the purpose is to develop a relationship, a personal relationship. Mary was just talking about having the learner having enough trust to risk saying things and making mistakes and realizing that it's safe, nobody's going to make fun of them. So this talk time can be that kind of relationship building time. And when students really can't say much, it's a pretty short time, but it can get longer and more personal as time goes on. And this makes me think about a woman that I was working with. This was before I moved to Bainbridge Island, and I was volunteering in a class. There was a teacher, and the students met 5 mornings a week, and I came in 1 morning a week and just assisted the teacher, which was great. I after having been an elementary school teacher, to just have the fun of teaching and no lesson plans, no report cards. It's just so fun. But this woman came from Guatemala, and if you didn't know better, you would have thought she was sullen or disengaged, not interested, not trying. She was just so closed. And so the teacher and I had this talk time, and it took, a month or so before she really started saying much of anything and started opening up. And her progress had been kind of flatlined for quite a while, but then she started opening up and I guess feeling safe. And then she really started making progress. And one time when I was chatting with her, she said she lived in a village in Guatemala and they spoke an indigenous Mayan language. And she learned Spanish, but she had never learned to read or write in any language. So I just imagine this woman coming to the United States, how terrified she must have been, not knowing how to speak, but also not knowing how to read and write. And she said she was just so amazed at herself that here she was, she could speak English and she could read and write. And it was just, such a gratifying conversation to have, to recognize that through the efforts of the teachers, certainly, she was there all the time, but also a little bit of my contribution. She was just making such great progress.
And it does speak a little bit to the idea that you have to have enough both confidence and understanding that to unlock the next few steps. And that may take some people a little bit of time, probably younger people less time, and older people or people with whose personalities, or in this case, she was coming so far that
so it takes a lot of patience and just belief that this person is here because they want to be here. And so my job is to make that happen as best I can. So in a lesson, after the talk time, you would review what you'd done before, the session before, and sometimes just keep working on that skill because it's a new one and the student's not very comfortable with it yet. You might extend it or move on to the next skill depending on what they're doing. And so, you work on vocabulary, grammar, syntax, all of those things as needed. Vocabulary is definitely a big part of it. One of our tutors was working with a man who was a gardener and working for someone else, and his dream was to have his own business. So she worked with him a lot on the vocabulary that you would need in terms of the tools that you use and the kinds of services that you provide, weeding and mowing, all that vocabulary, as well as kind of the business side of it. And so he was able to actually start his own business and seems to be doing very well. So that was a great success with the lessons focused on his goals. Another one of our tutors was working with a woman who was working in a restaurant, and so she used that restaurant's menu as the vocabulary to focus on. So everything is focused on what the student wants to do. We, as I've said before, we have a library and we have curricula, and you could just get lesson plans from the curricula, but you have to modify it so that it is giving the students what they want. So, people use a variety of activities. One of our tutors said that she's been working with a learner for 1.5 years, and he's progressed from very simple English words at the beginning to now he plays hangman better than she does, and they end their sessions by telling a joke. So you can see how he's progressed to those complicated things like joke telling. That takes some sophisticated understanding. So, excuse me. We just don't have a cookie cutter curriculum. Each lesson is tailored to the needs of the student.
So you try to do that by, if you can, obviously working with them to see what their goals are, like the man who wanted to start his business or the woman who was trying to feel more comfortable at work in the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just getting started with somebody for whom English is brand new, you just work on simple vocabulary and try to get a conversation going.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you
So a lot of variety, meeting to meeting.
Right. You know, my name is Lee. What is your name? You know, and so yeah, you just there are lots of resources in our library. We have lots of resources online, lots of resources to help you with that. And in our group, I don't want to call it an organization. In our group, new tutors can have a mentor if they want, and we have monthly meetings where we can support the tutors. So it's not like we bring a new tutor in and say, "Bye, have fun."
That's very comforting to hear. Very
Yeah,
comforting
exactly.
to hear.
Yeah. There's
Can
a
you
handbook too. I would say we have a handbook that we put together also
Right.
that you
That's
immediately have access to, in addition to a bunch of websites and things. So
Now, you hinted at this a little bit earlier, but there are other things that you might provide in addition to just straight language acquisition. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to accommodate to figure out how to live, not only speaking English, but living in this complicated country of ours.
yes, this is true. And as Lee pointed out, you end up, because you spend a lot of time with these folks, you develop a relationship with them. And when you're in a relationship with somebody, you start to find out what their other needs are. So, and that varies widely. Again, some people come and they already have a job established, whatever. Other people come and they really are in poverty when they arrive, and they just need some help with figuring out how to get food, how to get medical care if they need it, paying their bills, some transportation and housing. And not that we take this on as our job to make it happen, but we do try to guide them to how to figure out some of these things and who else to contact. And, you know, I've contacted schools, we've contacted social workers, we've contacted doctors, you know, just, but I don't want people to think this becomes your main thing in life that you have to do, but
You don't become a caseworker.
Thank you. That's perfect. Right. You don't, but we do try to help out. And I think I mentioned before, sometimes people need help with homework because the adults are going back to school as well as the kids. Some are dealing with trauma from experiences that led them to come here from their home country. And you just have to be sensitive to that. You have to be kind of careful what topics you bring up sometimes. And others had trauma just in the process of getting here. There's some horror stories about how people actually made the trip to get here. And again, it can be hard to make friends. I mean, you always hear about Seattle freeze? I mean, I don't think Bainbridge is quite that way, but it's tricky to make friends for anybody moving here. And if you have all this other stuff going in the background, things that are just life is difficult for you, but then you get kind of isolated too. Your English isn't perfect. You just have so much else going on that it's been nice for us to help people find something that they can do. And even for their kids, like we've helped kids get into swimming classes and soccer programs, and that helps the whole family when the kids are involved too. And then, like, there was a couple whose English is very good, but they were finding themselves pretty isolated. And one of our tutors found them the garden club to join because they had always loved to do that. And now they have a little group of friends and they're all gardening and they're practicing their English. So what we end up needing to do just kind of depends on who ends up on your doorstep. One thing that I think is kind of interesting is sometimes they need help for that naturalization exam. And I never knew what that encompassed before. And now I do, because we don't have to do it. We just get to be citizens because here we are, but they have to prove that they should be a citizen. So they're given 100 questions that they must memorize. They'll be given a multi-choice test, and they don't know which questions they're going to get until they arrive. So you have to do that. You have to be able to write a sentence from dictation. It really is a lot of an English test. And from the moment you arrive, they engage you in casual conversation that is actually part of the test. So from the minute you walk in, you're making an impression and they're taking notes on you. So it's kind of daunting. I did hear, interesting, if you're 55 and older, or if you've been here for 10 years, they reduce the expectations on the test for you. So if there's anybody out there wanting to take the test, it won't be as hard for you.
And did you, as you've looked at the test, have you been intimidated a little bit yourself about things that you, having never had to take it, might have had a hard time?
I haven't seen the actual test. Nobody's actually showed it to me, but you have to know all about United States history and politics. I know for sure. Yeah, more than probably most of us could answer without having to spend some time doing our homework.
Okay. And what kind of cultural differences have you found that make it difficult or challenging or interesting when you're working with somebody who is trying to learn English through your organization or group, excuse me, group?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to answer that question by actually asking you all a question. So this is the audience participation part of our time here together. And I'm just going to reassure you, there's no one right answer. And in fact, there are no wrong answers. So just relax. And I would appreciate it if you all would answer the question just by putting your answer in the chat. And so here's my question. When you think about culture, what are some elements of culture that come to mind? So I'm not looking for a definition of culture, but what are some elements like food? So that's one answer. So if you could put it, multiple things would be great. So I'll give you a few minutes. And I'd love to hear from everybody. If you're not sure how to do the chat, just go down to the bottom of your screen and there's a thing that says chat and you click on that and then it opens up a box and at the bottom it says type message here. So we have a number of things that people have said: music, celebrations, humor, religion, hobbies, games, sports, expectations for behavior by gender or age, food again. Yes, great. Yeah, so those are all elements of culture. And this is a graphic that I have found very interesting and helpful. This is the iceberg concept of culture. And so if you look at the top, it says surface culture. So this is above sea level, and the emotional level for this is relatively low. And here are the things that are part of culture that it's easy to see: food, dress, music, arts, drama, crafts, dance, literature, language, celebrations, games, all of those things. And those are some of the things that we think about first often when we're thinking about people from other cultures. And then underneath sea level, there's the deep culture that has unspoken rules like courtesy. You're supposed to say please and thank you. There's no law that says that, but that's part of our culture here. Body language, eye contact, relationship to animals, all of these things that we just take for granted that we never think about, that other people might not have the same cultural expectations about.
Yeah, look at all of our suggestions. We're above the line pretty much. Pretty much, yeah. Which is, very common. That's what we think about. And then down below, the unconscious rules, which are completely below sea level, and the emotional level is very intense here. So thinking about the definition of obscenity, roles in relationship to age, sex, class, occupation, kinship, and so forth. These are really what we consider to be our values.
that are part of our culture. So this is something that is we really have to keep in mind as we're working with people. I had a friend a number of years ago who was, her family had a girl from Germany who they were having stay with them for several weeks. And so I was over at their house and I was chatting with this girl. Her English was very good. And so I asked her, what's the most surprising thing about America that you've experienced? And she said, well, you have cemeteries here that are right around where people live. And where I'm from, the cemeteries are outside of town, so you don't look at them, you don't see them on a regular basis. And I definitely got the feeling that this was disturbing to her. She was very uncomfortable having these cemeteries around. And I was living in New England at the time, so there are lots of old cemeteries all over the place there. And there were several very close to where my friend lived. And I just thought that was so surprising. It was the last thing I would have thought of. But that's that deep culture. And so you have no idea what attitudes and beliefs and feelings and thoughts that your learner has regarding their culture sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that it might be even a little intimidating, but I guess just asking for forgiveness almost before you get started in a way.
Well,
If I say something that makes you uncomfortable, let me know.
Yeah. Reed, you'd make a great tutor.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you join us. And we've heard that you really don't have a whole lot to do there at the senior center. So in your free time.
Yes, I mentioned that you have about 24 balls in the air constantly, Reed. So
Some of them, as we learned earlier today when I was late for this meeting, are not always in the air. They're on the floor occasionally. But Michael is on here, so maybe we'll try to recruit him too.
I know, Michael, whoever you are. So one of our tutors is a woman, and she is working with an Islamic man. And so she was talking to us at one of our meetings about the cultural implications of that and the things that she and this man have had to navigate, because an Islamic man is not supposed to sit with a woman alone unless it's his wife. But she needs to sit with him to, because she's tutoring in person. She said it took a while to kind of navigate through and overcome that. And it brought up many conversations about male-female relationships, religion, bringing up children in a different culture. She said teaching a person who speaks and reads Arabic is difficult because the literacy systems are so different. You know, they read Arabic. And so having to learn the alphabet. And so for a grown man to have to learn this basic childhood alphabet from a woman, I think she found it was very difficult for him. And she said a woman cannot tell a man he's doing anything wrong, which makes it difficult to correct language and pronunciation. So she's really navigating a lot with this. And she said, tolerance and acceptance of different views and customs are requirements to be a successful tutor. While I teach English language, the cultural learning goes both ways. One of the most gratifying aspects for me is to get to know another culture from the inside.
Yeah, that sounds like he's being pretty generous too, to share that perspective, even if it makes him uncomfortable.
Yeah. He obviously really wants to learn English. Yeah, so I think this is the end of our specific things that we wanted to say. I do want to just remind you that we're interested in getting new tutors and new tutees, new students. So if you or anyone that you know is interested in either being a tutor or someone that wants to improve their English skills, you can contact us. And this is our email, besltutors@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has or your comments.
Mary, did you have something you wanted to say though?
No, I was just going to make sure we opened it up for questions if there are any.
Well, I'm just going to ask you each how long you've been doing this yourselves, and if you have had experience that was particularly moving for you in this with some of the people that you've worked with.
I'm trying to think. I think it's been about 4 years. I started with the person that you mentioned who was from Iran, had the teenage son. Actually, that's who I started with. And now I am actually working with a family from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as Lee pointed out, we're actually working with the teenage kids in that family instead of the adults, although the adults have also had tutoring from people within our group. I've ended up being a really good friend with this teenage guy. It has been, for me, it's been really fun watching him grow up. And he's been a very successful soccer player. It's been really fun to help him kind of make those connections. And it's a thing that has been brought up to me that I have a concern about, is that he's grown really fast. So he is not quite 14, but if you saw him, you'd say 15, 16. So he is a tall, and he's a very buff guy, right? Who wears a hoodie a lot. And it worries me a little bit. So, I mean, you do get close to people and you do get very attached to them. And I've actually talked to the school about, we have to start talking to him about being careful, which is such a sad thing in our society, that big, tall, dark-skinned guy wearing a hoodie, you know, it's just something to think about. He's the sweetest kid ever. But I know that, you know, we have.
Well, you're talking about some of those cultural issues that,
Yeah.
as they say in African American families, you have to talk the talk, and you're part of that now, I guess, in some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I guess, is you learn a lot about places in the world that you might not have thought about at all, like the Democratic Republic of Congo,
Right.
not somewhere you probably had on your map before you got to know a family there.
Nope. And that family has about 5 languages that they float in and out of all the time. So the mom was actually from, oh my goodness, Lee, help me. I just lost the word. It's a country right next to the DRC. Angola. Thank you. And their languages are Lingala and Portuguese. In the DRC, it's French and Lingala. So they've got Portuguese and French and Lingala just floating around all the time. And they all learned Spanish because they were in Spanish-speaking countries for a while. Now they're all learning English. So it's interesting to go to their house and just hear this potpourri, because they just kind of use whichever words that occur to them apparently at the time. And they all understand each other. It's amazing to listen to. So yeah, I've learned quite a bit.
And Lee, what about you?
I started volunteering as a tutor in this program that I was volunteering in. I was in Connecticut at the time, and I think I started in 2012. And so then when I came out here, I was interested in continuing, and so I found BESL, and I've been here, about 3.5 years with BESL. So.
Okay. Well, I want to really thank you for preparing this presentation. I learned a whole lot. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. It does sound like it would be very rewarding.